Welcome to It's a Controls Problem, where we do precision guesswork based upon unreliable data given to us by those of questionable knowledge. I'm your host, Charles Johnson. Well, welcome everyone. I am your host of It's a Controls Problem. I'm Charles Johnson. As you know, I'm here with my bestest buddy in the whole wide world, Matthew. Matthew, how are you today?
I am doing fantastic.
Awesome. And today, we actually have a special guest. I've known I've known this person for a few years now. His name is Justin Thomson. He is the director of MEP Services and Commissioning at Logan Pass Construction. However, he does have a side quest that he's been working on for a while that we're going to talk about today, which is actually a really exciting project, and I've seen it in action, and it works really, really well. So, Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Justin, as our guests have demonstrated over the course of the podcast, that most people just don't choose a controls career. So, when you're looking at your own path through the construction trenches, was there kind of like a click where you realized that, like, even if you stumbled into the industry, you knew you belonged here?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think that was pretty much at the very beginning. When I got out of the Navy, I started at Siemens, and that was just doing their basic Apogee software. I was doing field service work. We had a lot of medical office buildings. We had the National Institutes of Health buildings, and it kind of just circling up with some of the other controls guys. Just we kind of figured it out. It became a pretty good way to be the smartest guy in the room while also enjoying the camaraderie that I'd missed when I got out of the military. So it has a lot of the camaraderie part of it, and I would say when I was at Siemens, I knew that no matter where my career would go after that, I knew that I could always fall back on controls as like a comfort zone kind of peace of mind deal, and I did a few times over the course of my career.
Well, good. I really love hearing the stories and the background of where people are and where they come from and what makes them the person they are today. So, what were some of the early hurdles in the ins and out of automation that you had? And did you have a great like oops, my bad story that taught you a very important lesson about BAS?
Um, I would say a specific project that I had that really kind of made it like I don't know that made it really worth my time would be the NIH project, where I was the kind of the lead service technician out there. We kind of had a group of guys, and there was a building that had a water leakage. The water started pouring out of the attic and it poured itself down the elevator shaft where all of the expansion bus controllers were located. So we flooded the entire building. Basically, their entire network went down. This was a biosafety level, the biosafety hazard labs that had to maintain their pressurization. So a lot of the redundancies and like contingencies were things like fail safe positions were all tested that day, and it actually worked out pretty well. So I was part of the cleanup crew that had to go back in with a bunch of old legacy equipment, just people finding stuff on their trucks. Uh, and then we wound up putting that building back together over the course of like 14 hours or something like that. So it was a Herculean effort, but definitely a good story.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Holy cow. Yeah, that's that sometimes those long days are pretty brutal. So, um, I've had my fair share. Um, one thing that I really like about what you are about is your dedication and your foresight into the future. So, what I'd like to kind of focus on right now is WASP Technologies. So, can you explain what WASP Technologies is? Then, And then we're going to go. I do have a follow up question for that. So, what is WASP Technologies to start?
So the name WASP just kind of came to me. It was never supposed to be anything fancy, but it stands for Workstation Automation Supervisory Platform. And that basically was what I wanted to call the device that I, had envisioned back when I was working and at one of the stops back in BAS and controls in my career, kind of at a time where I needed to really decompress. So COVID made it so that we were, naturally forced to work from home a lot more. And if we were doing any sort of work, we didn't have to contend with an occupied building space because everything was unoccupied now. So basically, what WASP was, it was a platform that was inspired by. I had this technician who was supposed to go do some preventative maintenance on a building, and he gets out there and he calls me a little bit. This is a Friday. He calls me a little bit and he's like, "Hey, for some reason the a bunch of the icons look weird and they don't really make any sense and everything. Niagara's not working. I rebooted. Nothing's happening." So I said, "All right, go on to the bank. Go do the other one, please, and I'll go out there and I'll go check it out." So I go out there to go check it out, and as I'm sitting down, he calls me and tells me that the bank is doing the same thing. So I I asked him, I said, "What did you do when you sat down?" He says, "Well, I just checked my email, and a little while later, all of a sudden, the entire thing goes crazy." So basically, what he did is he checked his email, got the server PC infected with a ransomware, locked down everything, broke all the connections, just completely encrypted everything at two different sites on a Friday. So I was supposed to go skiing that Friday. I was supposed to leave in the evening, but instead I was stuck trying to get that stuff made fun of. Basically is what it was. But I kind of had enough at that point and decided that I wanted to kind of take my customers and take my realm of responsibility outside of that threat vector where, it's as simple as, for an idiot technician to just check his email. You're never going to stop that. You can tell them don't do that all you want, but you're probably never going to get that all the way out. So this way, if they do, it puts them on an operating system that's incompatible with the virus or the ransomware. So it's basically protecting the server PC from those threats that, target specifically Windows PCs because they're so prevalent. And it's just kind of by removing ourselves from it was the ultimate goal. And then when COVID hit, I had to find a way to be able to remotely access them through encryption. Obviously you don't want to have all your ports open. You don't want to have your systems exposed to the internet. So I built it's a self service. Excuse me. It is a self-certifying. Excuse me. Yeah, because it's security certificate, fully encrypted tunnel VPN that basically you could be anywhere in the world that's attached to the internet and you fire the VPN up and it's your computer masquerades as if it's on the local network. So I integrated that into it as well. I kind of had to tweak a little bit the public IPs because if it's on DDNS, or excuse me, if it's on dynamic IP, then it's going to, it could change and you could break your VPN. So I put a DNS daemon on it. Basically, it monitors the public IP address and it updates a server. So instead of trying to resolve via an IP address, it resolves via a domain name, like a www dot, whenever it goes to search for that VPN connection. So it basically made it bulletproof. And I can even vouch for that bulletproof because I was just in China a couple weeks ago and I set up the VPN server at my house to basically redirect all my traffic from China through my house. And the biggest bottleneck was the fact that I left that computer on Wi-Fi and it was a little bit slow. So that VPN is actually pretty bulletproof. It got through the Great Firewall of China, where I was just surfing the web like I was sitting at my house. So little proof of concept that I just had. But that's kind of like the long and short of what WASP became, kind of just taking itself out of the threat that the traditional Windows supervisor has, while also integrating some, pretty unique functionality that allows for remote servicing, which is always important. It even has a team viewer client on it. So when they're going through setup and they need to call Donnie and, Pete back at LinkSpring, it's a phone call that just say, hey, give me the team viewer credentials and your tech support can log right into the machine. So just I had a really good vision for it. I think it has everything that's necessary to be successful. I just don't know if the voice if I've had loud enough of a voice or if I've advertised it in the proper direction is all. But as long as it's still fun and I've had a lot of fun building it.
Yeah, a couple things. Yep, idiots will always do idiot things. The most American thing that you can do is to do the thing that you're not supposed to. So, like,
Yep.
as soon as you're told you can't do something, well, the hell with you. I'm going to do it anyway. I know that one all too well. Um, I like the idea of a Linux-based Niagara station because it can mitigate the risk in the, in the capacities of like you said. Obviously, some of the biggest hurdles for that are people trying to understand Linux commands and stuff like that. That's really the big one there. But I think that they can run faster than a Windows installation because there's a lot of I think there's a lot of let's say red tape you have to cross that isn't there on the Linux station.
Yep. A lot of overhead processor use within Windows. So much more than it would blow you away. Having a nice shell out operating system on a Linux PC is just it's exponents faster. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So, obviously, you have TeamViewer on there. Can you put other remote software on there besides TeamViewer?
Yes, so we also have zero tier. So that's not necessarily remote support unless you're, really ridiculously smart with that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But zero tier, it uses the internet to create a virtual secured network to, between devices, anywhere that's attached to the internet. So that was another proof of concept that we had where we set up, a terminal unit, like basically a TEC or a terminal unit, VAV,
Hmm.
in Virginia, and we set up the connection to my house in Denver, Colorado. We were wondering what the pull rate was going to be. We were wondering what the connection was going to be. Was there going to be any lag? And it was faster than if it would have been plugged into an MSTP, locally on site. It was blisteringly fast. So we left
That's awesome.
both devices up sharing data for a couple weeks just to make sure that, the connection didn't die. We just, we set up some graphics, we set up remote communication, and that was a zero tier daemon that basically takes one of the WASP basically and turns it into a node for that network, and then they would have another node device on anywhere else on the internet, and as long as it's bound to the correct VLAN credentials, it's just amazing technology. Let me tell you what.
Oh, was that with Jeff with Alpha Epsilon?
Yep, yeah, it is. I've been working with Jeff now in my day job capacity. He was doing some commissioning support for me at one of our third party data center support roles.
Hmm.
Um, it was worked out really well with him, his friend Kevin, and now they're doing a big controls contract for one of the data centers that we're the general contractor for. So we got them in on a big data center build. So it's really good for them as well.
Okay. Um, from a granular perspective, how does your background in the field and your innovative work with WASP, because it is to me it is innovative, how does that influence the way you design and build solutions?
It's funny you say the word solutions because in my career, we always say that, in my day job, we always say that we're solutions oriented. And basically what we do is we're not afraid of problems. We're not afraid of people coming to us with problems. But what we encourage is for the people that come to us with the problems to come to us with an idea of how that's going to be resolved. Because usually the people that discover those things, such as, let's just say the electrician, will come to us and say, hey, they didn't size this wire properly, or we didn't pull enough conductors. Well, okay, so how about next time you come to me and say, we didn't size this wire properly, or there isn't enough conductors pulled. Here's a change order for what it would take to correct that, because then I can take that and I can run with it down the proper channel. So becoming solutions oriented is kind of the my MO across the board. So when I see a problem, like for example, when I saw it when we got hit with that ransomware, to me that was a problem identified. How can we make this never happen again? So we did, and then I started taking some technologies and some thoughts on how can I remotely access these buildings, without having to go sit my ass on a stool in their IT closet plugged into, something with my laptop on the floor. How can I access that a little bit better? So that was when I developed the VPN. You set a goal of you identify a problem and you attack the problem until it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, that's actually a really, um, I think that's a really great way to think about it. Sometimes, you do have, developers say, like, come to me with a solution rather than a problem. And it
Yep.
sometimes seems counterproductive or not counterproductive, counterintuitive, because it's like, well, you're the developer, right? Like,
Yeah.
why am I coming to you with a solution when you're supposed to be developing the solution? But really what you're saying is, well, you have a problem. Do you have an idea of what you think is going to get it done? And then from there, you can then take, what they're saying to you, because obviously they're entrenched in what's going on. And then you can provide that solution. And I like calling things solutions rather than a product, right? Because
Yes.
especially if someone has like solutions in their name for like a company, right? It's not like, Acme, Acme Solutions of Honeywell. No, it's like called Acme Solutions. So not only, sure, you may represent Honeywell, but you may have, you may need to use like Thermicon, backnet wireless sensors, or maybe you need to use like a Babel Buster for like some Modbus to LAN gateway or something like that, right? Like, so being able to bring everything together for the ultimate for the ultimate comfort for the end user is really the desired result, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. Yep.
One thing that I always find interesting is that um the community at large talks a constant game about seamless integration and breaking down silos in buildings. So, looking back, what was the hardest lesson you learned about breaking down those like human silos on a job site, or those moments where you had to find a common gateway to talk to like a frustrated owner or like a stubborn sub?
Well, I would say I don't know if this would be considered the right way to do it, but it was a way that I did it. And I was working in controls. This was another time when I had taken a step back from MEP and commissioning, and I was working for a controls company that it absolutely worked the dog shit out of me. I was exhausted. 5 different cities in 5 days, flying during the day, working at night. It was an exhausting time. Now, on top of that, they weren't really the best contractor to work with when it came to being a sub or a vendor to that was supposed to work with a general contractor. So it's kind of how I met the guys that I work with now at Logan Pass is when was I was originally their controls vendor, and my ownership was very finicky when it came to exactly what work I was allowed to do. I was there, I was on site, but I was very restricted, and they would tell me when you get into work at 6 a.m., Go sit in the conference room and just wait for me to call you. If somebody asks you to do something, tell them to call me and don't do anything. So I was sent out to a job site for a long time to just sit there on my hands while there was contract negotiations happening, or arguments, or delays in schedule, or I don't know. I was held in the dark. So I'd had enough because I had done the programming for this. I had done everything I was set up for it. I'm sitting on site. I needed to get point to point done. I needed to put the program in, and I needed to start up the VFDs. That was it. And I was done. I could have it all done in half a day, but I'd spent the last day and a half sitting there waiting to get on what I was doing. So I went into the general contractor, who was Andrew Peeler, who's actually my supervisor now. He's the VP of Logan Pass Construction. And I told him, I said, I'm kind of tired of being here. I'm tired of seeing everybody stressed out because this is happening. And I went and I started up the VFDs. Well, the negotiations were happening where my company was refusing to let me touch the VFDs until the mechanics who provided the VFDs provided the startup and the wiring and the startup. So basically, my company was arguing that mechanics need to do control wiring, which that was wrong. That was objectively wrong, if you ask me. If you ask me that right now, I still stand by it. So I did the wiring, I did the programming, I got everything done and started up, and then my company spent the back half of the day trying to figure out who did it. Meanwhile, I had gotten it done and gone home already. So it was a phenomenal, like, I had realized at that point that I couldn't work with a company like that couldn't put the project with any sort of not even empathy, but no priority on getting the project done when there's so many other moving parts happening. So hopefully that a little long and drawn out, but um,
No, I think that's I think that's a fine answer. I mean, by the way, you've had all great responses so far. I agree where things like, I always look at, yeah, it may not be the right way, but that's the way that I did it, right? Or that's the way that
yeah,
I handled something. And in some cases, we have no way to handle it but that way. And obviously, hindsight is always 2020, regardless. But in some cases, you need to get your point proven there. And for the record, I also agree. I don't think mechanics should be responsible for the wiring.
yeah,
Um, that's not, for me, that's not the way that I would. That's not the way that I would run a company. But then again, I don't run a company, so um, you know. Uh, but really, no, I think that you handle it. I think you handled it the best way that you could. And I'm sure that a lot of people listening here would probably handle it the same way. So, but I never worry about whether something is necessarily right or wrong in the time. I mean, obviously there are things where where you could get in trouble, but I think that
of
your point,
course.
I think that your point was, I think your point came across in the best way possible. So, I have another question here I thought about. Uh, when and actually I thought about this as I'm going through a system myself. So we've all seen over-engineered systems that kind of look great on paper, but are a nightmare to maintain. So, what is your personal litmus test for knowing when a design has become too complex for its own good?
Um, Again, I'm a paperwork guy. I need to look at the drawings to initially determine it. I think that it's gotten overly complicated when your equipment schedule it has to be put on more than one page. I think that if you can fit it all in one full-size construction drawing document where you can legibly read everything in the size that it is, I think that that's a decent sized building. But then at that point, maybe there's things that you can pull out of there. Um, uh, yeah, and it depends on, again, the customer as well. So I've worked in hospitals and I've worked in data centers. So there's things that are different between those two. So if something kind of stood out as overkill in a hospital, it would be considered probably completely insufficient in a data center. So Just given my breadth of experience in places that I've been, it's really tough to answer that. Um,
No, I think no, I think you answered that appropriately. There are times where engineers do try to launch a rocket. There's no doubt about that. For me, I think a system is over engineered when the way that I look at the way that I like look at a design is the ease of how I could think about programming it like almost instantaneously. And if I look at it and I realize that it's going to require this, and this, and I'm like, okay, after like the third item, if there's more than three that I take a look at, I'm like, yeah, no, we're trying to launch a rocket here, and we don't need to do that.
yeah,
I heard or I read a sequence once, and I've mentioned it on the story before, but I think it actually kind of works out really well here, where I had a sequence that said, space temperature set point shall be at which relative humidity is at 55%, and space temperature dew point is 1 degree above soil dew point temperature. Um, when you hear something like that, and you're just like, what?
yeah. I'm
Uh,
trying to imagine the blocks in my head. If I'm
yeah,
going to put it on a wire sheet, how would I set that up? Nope.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And so, like, sometimes you have to just, once you look at something, you just have to ask the questions. And, once you ask the questions, okay, now we finally have gotten, to the right place.
Hey, Controls fans, Matthew here. Charles and I have recently formed the Logic Link Collective with our friends over at Stacks and Jewels in order to get the word out about the current knowledge gap and how their team is working to solve it. Good controls techs are hard to find, but Stacks and Jewels is building them from the ground up. 14 weeks of hands on training on real equipment results in graduates who actually understand the ecosystem of a building. They are doing the heavy lifting, but they need the industry to meet them halfway. You can contribute financially to support their mission, or you can give your time as a mentor or technical advisor. If you're hiring, stop looking for unicorns and start looking at Stacks and Jewels graduates. Everything you need to get in touch is in the show notes. Let's support the people who are actually solving our industry's biggest problems. As always, thanks for listening.
So, data centers, as you know, are evolving at a breakneck pace. So, from your perspective, what is the biggest shift happening right now in these facilities that are being constructed?
Well, so I love talking about this. So we always like to refer to, the tech industry in its eras, right? Some of our most recent eras would be, I'd say 10 years ago was cloud. Everything was moving their operations to the cloud, in lieu of having their operations on a local storage, little small data center in the basement. They would put it off at the data centers. So initially it was this mad dash to see how many square feet you can get and how many racks you can put into those square feet and how quickly you can cool it. So there was all this mad dash of where we're gonna put it. Well, let's find a spot for that's cheap water, cheap land, cheap power, and somewhere locally or somewhere we can concentrate them for use and overseas cables. So we evolved from the cloud state phase to the cryptos phase where, all these cryptos were using a lot more power. So we kind of started to see signs of what we're calling now as the densification age, where now we've evolved beyond the crypto and the typical cloud processors. We're now moving into AI processors, where a single rack of cloud or crypto could be anywhere from 5 to 15 kW per rack. But an AI rack, it is now estimated to be at about targeting 200 kW per rack. And if you think about, in a typical data center, there's 40 racks in a row, two rows in an aisle, and then you'll have, 80 to 100 aisles in a pod, and then you'll have 10 pods in a building, and then five buildings on a campus. So you see how quickly that power the densification happens where they're now trying to put so much more power into them. And with that means that we've officially, and not even close, we've actually blown by the level for which we can use air to cool these racks and to cool this IT load, because air is just insufficient. We can't get the air cold enough without going below your dew points and running into convection issues. So now we're doing liquid cooled data centers where they're taking existing air cooled data centers and they're adding new chillers to that capacity, and they're installing underfloor piping that they can tap into, and they draw that up to what's called a CDU, which is basically another heat exchanger that has its own coolant loop that goes to the racks themselves. And those can be those really cool looking immersion racks where you see the processors bubbling away. Or it could be a cold plate, which is kind of kind of retrofitted into a server that was, kind of put together to be an AI, one, but it has basically a contact with the panel, with the cold plate. So it circulates the water or the coolant into that capillary. So basically, this densification age has created this like huge opportunity to rethink mechanical cooling. And back in my controls days, a lot of the things that we would program and a lot of our programs had to do with air side cooling, air handlers, fan coil units, terminal boxes, unit heaters, enthalpy wheels, all sorts of cool stuff. But now we're in a time where it's just going to be chiller to heat exchanger, and then it might go out to a tower, or it may be a package unit outside on a skid. But this densification age has really has almost eliminated the air factor of it. So now we're going to have simply a rooftop unit for pressurization, a DOAS, and then another rooftop unit maybe serving a small admin area with a couple VAVs. And then after that, it's going to be all liquid side cooling. What I love about that is it brings another dimension to it now. Instead of having 65-degree chilled water, now we have to have 85-degree chilled water because liquid conducts heat and pulls heat away so much more efficiently. So it's all happening so quickly. And, I love being at the forefront of it, not only as, having my controls mind, because that's, again, I still consider myself a controls guy if you ask me what my career is, but working on the general contractor side, getting these builds, having the foresight to look ahead and see what is that going to entail, what sort of testing, how can we prove that out, how can we prove that system works before turning it over to the customer, because I'm a commissioning agent as well. So I see myself as two-faced. I see myself as the controls guy and the commissioning agent. So yeah, two different ways of looking at the world, but it's such a cool time to be alive right now in data centers, I'll tell you that.
Unless you're using Claude and allow it to have access to a database and it deletes the whole database in 9 seconds.
Yep.
Um, I read that. Someone sent that to me, and I was just like, "You've got to be kidding me." Yeah, like people know how I feel about AI. But speaking about AI, we're seeing and I'm glad you mentioned it. So, because we're seeing a massive influx of AI driven demand. So, you kind of talked about that. You kind of talked about that physical infrastructure, but how do data centers adjust with that to keep up with the density of heat and power that AI requires?
So generally, when the data center is built, there's always a mind for what's the next leap forward. So back 10 years ago when they were building these things, 15 years ago when they were building these buildings, they were always imagining that there would be room for expansion and room for growth and room for more. So a lot of these buildings come out of the box with all the infrastructure and all the built, the bones in place for significantly more power than what was purchased. Why they wouldn't purchase all of it to begin with is really a discussion between them and, maybe what their utilization was going to be. Maybe they couldn't build it fast enough. Maybe they were waiting for the new technology to come around. But a lot of these buildings were built for that. So we're seeing it's pretty easy to tap into it where you have, a 10 chiller building that's, maybe takes up, I want to say, I think this one has 40,000 square feet of data floor. It's got 10 chillers, 10 chiller bays, but there's only 8 chillers there. They have 2 ports that are there just sitting there for future expansion, that they just need to, they can hot tap it right in. They don't even have to shut the system down.
Wow. Yeah, like I think I think that's a good thing to talk about. So like, where so when it comes to future proofing, which is what really a lot of buildings should do, and specifically data centers, where do most projects fail to meet that future proofing standard?
I would definitely say with their preventative maintenance systems, or if they have like an ongoing commissioning process, something that continuously maintains their equipment to the highest degree of readiness. I would say one of my customers, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention, plug those guys in, but they have a very good they have a very good maintenance program, and they have a network standard that they refer to as their Bible, basically.
You can
They,
plug them if you want. I mean,
okay, yeah,
I
it's no problem. It's Verizon. So Verizon has a very well put together set of standards, and those standards refer back to their network standards, their NSTDs. And their NSTDs call for certain types of equipment above a certain rating or serving, or an active service in this type of building. If it's an MSC, if it's a switch, if it's even just a tower building, little remote cell site, whatever. Each one of them has a certain commissioning and maintenance, operability requirement. And if what I've noticed is that we can go to a Verizon site and it's the same equipment that's been operating for the last 25 or 30 years. And it still runs and operates exactly the way it was, exactly the way it was intended, using old school relays, almost no logic whatsoever, just a couple toggle switches that, the site's not even manned, half the week. So a lot of these buildings, they were just designed very bare bones and basic to work and to run, and the Verizon has that ongoing commissioning process that really hits home. They'll have 5 year maintenance where they'll do inverter testing every 5 years. They'll do generator teardowns every 7 years, I think it is. They'll do 179 testing after they get new battery upgrades. There's all sorts of these standards, and it's wonderful to say that. So I think that the best way to hedge to future proof is to invest in your current setup because you want it to last.
you're right. They do have a very good infrastructure in place, and actually they're pretty sharp with Niagara too. Um,
Yep. Peter Hadnon is their lead controls guy, and I actually tried selling him in on WASP just to try to see if I can get him to bite. Maybe I can put them out in Verizon sites. Just, how amazing would that have been? And he was like, well, talk to me when it becomes more mainstream. I was like, well, I know what that means. So, gotcha, Peter.
wow.
Yep.
Yeah, sometimes that's a tough one, right? Sometimes, that kind of thing about mainstream is like, you know, everything started off small, right? And so sometimes it is more advantageous to be the one that's helping getting it off the ground versus keeping something that's established. Though I understand, I do understand the logic there. Sometimes I don't necessarily agree with the philosophy of that, but sometimes it's they have
Verizon's
other.
yeah, Verizon's got to weigh a lot of risk factors, so
Yep.
I
Yep.
understand the wait for it to be mainstream and be a bigger name and have also for your side of the story to be able to carry more of the liability if you're a bigger company.
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. So here's another question I have. What's the most common broken promise that you're seeing in the industry right now regarding to what technology can actually deliver versus what's actually being sold?
Hmm. I would say, and I'm going to just speak from the most experience I've had recently. I would say the biggest broken promise has been deliverability. Um, and I say that because when I refer to deliverability, I mean the product delivery wherever that may be or whatever that may look like. Um, I've noticed, and again, I am a general contractor. We work on job sites. We provide, milestones, and we execute phases, and there's phase turnovers and, milestones, deliverables, and deadlines that we have to hit. But we really go at it with kind of like a three-prong approach with our kind of core values, right? Where it has to be turned over safely, it has to be turned over complete and on time. So by kind of, narrowing in on those three kind of core values, that's, you know, that's kind of been the movement, and that's the kind of the direction that we've been headed. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure if that answers the question. But
Yeah. For the record, I think it does. And
okay.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Delivering what is promised, um, I think is absolutely the biggest pitfall that happens. And it's not just with like even parts of technology, like even just like, for example, let's say you're a Vicon rep and someone says, "Hey, go out there and you're gonna rip out that old Distech Jace, and we're gonna put everything on the Vicon Jace." And so then, like, you take the station, whatever, you copy and you paste it in there, and you think you've got all the modules ready. Then all of a sudden, the wizard doesn't work. And they're like, well, why doesn't the wizard work? Well, because you didn't buy a support pack because you no longer have a Distech Chase, right? So, like, then all of a sudden you got to go to the customer. Hey, by the way, Mr. Customer, you're going to have to pay for this. Well, that's not what you told me. You told me I could just put this on here and it's done, right? So, I think a lot of that comes even from a lack of research or whether or not someone has done it in the past. And so, like, what you find, I think, in that particular case is if you did just a little more research ahead of time, you should be able to accurately, well, maybe not necessarily accurately, but you should be able to get very close to the system that they're looking for. To the point where, like, even if you're missing like one or two items, they could be so minimal that it doesn't really matter, right? So, I tell you what, you're talking about AI, so let's kind of talk about autonomous buildings here, where, like when we talk about the idea of autonomous buildings, where AI is handling like the tuning in real time, technically speaking, how far away are we from actually letting go of the steering wheel and trusting that algorithm to manage like a central plant without a human in the loop? Like, where do you think we are on that timeline?
I would say we are bloody close, and that's because of somebody that Matt Vanberg introduced me to. The
Mhm.
guys over at Facil AI. They have an AI agent that integrates with. I think they're at about a dozen now. I want to say um, about a dozen different BAS, BAS front end software that it integrates with, and they assign an agent, and they're seeing like a ridiculous reduction in energy costs just in the first year of implementation. And that's not also not taking into account the fact that it gets smarter over time. So the longer it's in operation, the more effective it is, as opposed to the in the other direction. And I've seen the results of it. I've seen the daemon at work. I've seen the outputs. Um, I was actually looking to see, if I could help him out with his product, kind of using a WASP as the gateway mostly,
Mhm.
kind of just basically um, taking the operating system, forwarding the ports internally, and just allowing him, access through that remote VPN. So he'll have like so the AI could have be stationed elsewhere, and the AI would just be connected remotely to the site. So he's really working on something special, and he's been working on that for a little over a year now. I mean, I want to say a year and a half even. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, that sounds about right because um, we had them on, I think February of last year. I think it was, and they had quite a following. But yeah, they've been Keith and them
Keith, yeah.
really, Keith and them really have a good formula down. And I like the vision that Keith has, um, and I think I like where it's headed. And I, and USC really likes where it's headed, and they have a few other big clients. The only reason why I'm mentioning USC because we had Kenny Seaton on here in one of the episodes. I think it was last year, and maybe it was this year. I don't remember. We've done so many episodes that some I know the guests, but I may not necessarily remember the order.
So,
But yeah, they've done quite a good job there.
and then
Um,
you notice Johnson Controls just bought Nantum, so
yep.
that's like using that engine as part of the Johnson Controls line is like I've always been impressed by Johnson Controls for back-end software. I always use them
Mhm.
for VAVs, air handlers. I used Facility Explorer, which is kind of that, the Kirkland signature brand version of it. But
Yes.
it's quite amazing. It's very powerful. At least and that was also 8 years ago, the last time I used that, I think. No, it'd be less than that. It would be 6 years. Still a long
Yep.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, yeah, Facility Explorer, for those of you who don't know, that is Johnson's version of Niagara. Um, most, not all, but most vendors do have a Niagara. Most vendors do have a Niagara OEM line, and so yeah, Johnson calls it FX, and yeah, if you're bringing in any of those in there, absolutely. I actually don't mind their product. I'm not really a fan of Metasys, but that's my own personal bias towards it. But there are a lot of people that have Metasys out there, and a lot of people that still have a lot of Johnson controllers out there. So it is actually it's been considered it's one of the top control systems. It's been a few recent polls I've seen where Johnson's like really at the top or very close to the top. So.
Between them, Schneider, Siemens, I feel I pretty much determined them to be the big three, when
Mhm.
it comes to having a complete product line. I was a Siemens guy right out the gate, so I'm a little bit biased towards that. But the more I got into reliable controls and the more I got into Facility Explorer, Metasys, more I got into those, I realized that, the world is changing and changing for the better, and this is it. I was getting better. So,
Yeah, I do like from a non-Niagara led product. I do like reliable controls. Um, I think that they're easy to install. I think Control Basic is very easy to program. I really do. I do like the products that they come out with, and actually now they are releasing here soon. I believe it's going to be soon. Maybe it's quarter 3. I don't remember. It was at AHR. They're actually coming out with a block programming version of their stuff. So they're kind of switching from the line code to block code to kind of help people who are more visual in that
yeah,
perspective.
yep.
So here's an interesting question I thought about, and it's kind of it's kind of it goes on a different tangent, but I kind of want to talk about soft skills with you because soft skills are often ignored in the industry. So, how did you learn to bridge the gap between the technical complexity and the simple, effective communication when tensions are high? How do you handle that?
Um, that was a good question. Good question. So the soft skills. So I think getting into the details, right? Being able to speak details when it comes to certain people. If certain people are coming at me with certain information, the last thing they want to do is look at somebody who looks back at them with the same fear that they may have in their eyes, right?
Mhm.
So I think having a really strong technical knowledge to be able to speak the language is absolutely critical. When it comes to certain pieces of equipment or certain vendors, certain subs, certain trades, that kind of stuff, you have to be able to you have to be able to take what information you're given and whatever technical jargon that's been spoken to you, but you have to then be able to turn around and explain it to the people that are your partners in crime out in the trailer, but they may not have the technical knowledge or technical background that I may have, so I have to be able to speak to it so that they understand what it means. So kind of, I guess, I would say filtering information properly, is definitely a good way to help kind of mitigate temperatures on site. Because if everybody starts, getting wound up right away, it really gets wound up pretty high at the top because they're kind of looking down and expecting the calm, they're expecting the ability to work and to talk your way through the situation and solve the problem. So soft skills, yeah, I would say is details.
Yeah. That is, I think that's an important one that a lot of people miss. Remembering your audience is also a really good one too. And I think that is a skill that um, very few people actually have, to be honest. Um, to be able to talk the technical talk to the people that need to, while pivoting to the lay terms for people who are not as technical. I think that there are people that do miss that mark a lot. Um, let's see. I have another question. I think. Um, Hmm. Let's actually kind of talk about technicians here because we mentioned them before. Now,
Yep.
when you're looking for like the next generation of technicians, here's a question I have, and maybe I think that for me this is I think I will probably be on the opposite side of you on this, but we'll see how it goes because I've asked a few people this before, and I kind of like asking my guests this. So when you're looking
Sure.
at the next generation of technician, do you feel they need to be better with a multimeter or better with a command line?
I would say better with a command line,
Hmm.
because that means that they understand that if they're going to override something or if they're going to access something, that means that they can visualize what the functionality is, right? Um,
Hmm.
and I would say that if they're good enough with a command line, they can figure out a multimeter. That to me is small potatoes when it comes to the grand scheme of things, because with a multimeter, what are you looking for? You're looking for to see if voltage is present. You're checking to see continuity, checking to make sure, wire isn't broken, for your continuity checks. Or check to see if a digital output is closed, yes or no. Does it have voltage on it? There's very few things that you can actually do with a multimeter, but when it gets into a command line, that is everything. That's everything that we do. If you wanted to properly override an output, you can do that through the command line if you know how to do it. So you wouldn't be able to use that multimeter if you didn't have the ability to go through a command line and manipulate systems that way. Whether that's, looking at a program, modifying it that way, overriding points, you know, pausing a program, changing color schemes, modifying graphics. I don't know if you would do it that way, but I feel like you have so much more control in the command line. Also, I'm a Linux guy, so I'm a little biased.
No, that's I think you have I think you have a solid point. Um, for me, and I guess just because of just kind of like the old school me there, where I feel like I can teach. Obviously, you can't. It's harder to teach old dogs new tricks, like really old dogs. Um, but I think people even my age can grasp the concept of computers a little more. Yeah, just for the record, I am on the opposite side. I'd rather have someone understand the tools that they have versus the command prompt, because I can probably find someone who knows as much mechanical systems, but may not necessarily be so like electrically inclined. Um, and so like I can pair those two and have that guy just out in the field and do whatever, or maybe even teach them the skills they need for computer. But absolutely, I think that your side is valid, and I think um, of the people I've spoken to, I think that you have brought the most convincing argument to me to potentially change my mind. So I think
Okay.
your answer was I think your answer was good. I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet, but I
It's
but
just a
I
mountain to move.
do.
That's all, Charles.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty big mountain, so, but no, I'm joking, but no, I think that is more than fair. You do need to understand, I think you do need to understand more what's going on, like from a computer perspective. I think that I've just seen too many horror stories of like a really smart guy that knows computers really well, and then I put him out in the field and they almost electrocute themselves, and I'm just like, oh Lord Jesus, why are we? Like, what are
We're
we
low
doing
voltage.
here?
It's fine. They'll be all right. It's low
Well,
voltage.
well, you think that, but I know a person that did not shut off rooftop units that had 480 and ran communication wire and got hit with the 480 pretty badly. Um, so again, you would think that that would be common sense, but not necessarily. Not necessarily from the people that I have seen. But no, I think your point is really valid.
Mm.
Um, you know, what do you think, looking back at your career, and you've been doing this for a while, what is one piece of advice that you'd give to a technician who has the technical chops but struggles to like lead a team or even managing a business?
I would say double down on what you're good at. If you know that you just don't tolerate people too well, if you don't like to be in that leadership, high visibility role and to have that type of responsibility, there's still a place for you. I think that you can be wildly successful, as successful as you want to be, without having to step into a role that you're not fully comfortable with. Being comfortable with your role is really, really important. And generally with promotions and things like that comes that higher visibility, more forward-facing role. But if that's not for you, I wouldn't try to force yourself to do it, because then you're going to get yourself stuck in a position where you know you've made it too high, and then taking a step back is really a it doesn't feel too good. I can tell you that I was there, and when I went back into controls after my second stint in MEP, yes, second stint in MEP, it was very much a big fish in a little pond, and that's why I had to invent something, because I had to keep that crazy mind of mine going, just to challenge myself, because I was so ridiculously challenged by something else that, when I came back to BAS and to this little 40-hour a week daily day job where I would commute to work every day, with it was just, there was a lot of things missing, and I struggled with that as well. So kind of the deceleration of that. So I wouldn't recommend take biting off more than you can chew. I recommend getting to a position where you're comfortable doing that and just execute. Stay where you are, because there is a place for you. Wherever you are, they need you more than you need them.
Yeah, I think of like Icarus, right? Like some people fly too close to the sun.
Hmm.
Um, and then that fall from grace is super hard to recover from. And you need to be able to bounce back from that. And I think that is phenomenal advice. Um, Really, I absolutely think that's something that everyone should learn. Um, Stick with what you're good at. If you don't know something, you don't know something. Find someone that knows it and build that team of these experts that you have to help you succeed, and then you all will rise together.
Yep. Surround yourself with the best, and it is insane how quickly things will start to come together.
Hmm. Yep, absolutely, absolutely agree with that, 100%. So, um, two more questions I have. Uh, this one actually does have to deal with the Logan Pass. Um, so what is the Logan Pass vision for the foreseeable future, and where do you see smart construction heading?
Well, also I love that you call it smart construction because that's what my team and that's what my role and that's what my program brings to what has always been a very typical, monotonous, mundane process. We have to add this additional layer in that adds value while also not fucking with the schedule, pardon my French.
No, it's okay.
We have to make sure that it gets done right. The priorities are, like I said, safety, quality, schedule. So that's the top three core values starting at the top. We don't sacrifice anything for safety. We won't sacrifice safety for quality, but if it means turning over late, guess what? We're going to turn it over correctly. So
Yep.
I would say, overall dedication to that. Um, Logan Pass's direction has been in the previous 5 years to be a general contractor that has a primary focus on integrating the commissioning process and taking the value that would be expected to be added in the level fours and the level fives to be done in the level zero through level three, which is where the general contractor is most actively involved. We call that in the commissioning industry, it's called shift left. It's called shift left the value, or shift left the commissioning process. So the idea is for the commissioning agents to get involved sooner in the process and sooner in the build and performing pre-checks such that when we actually go to do that loaded test, there's little to no chance that it's going to fail. Now, in the end, the whole purpose of commissioning is to test it out and to try to break it anyways, but I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent there. So, effectively, Logan Pass Construction wants to take the commissioning industry and have it integrated into the construction industry. We're building out a training program that ultimately my 10-year goal for that is for it to be an institute that has credentials, that has a continuing education program, that has that is actually viewed upon to basically be an academy, a construction academy. We'd be partnering with the big guys in the industry. That would be the HIT Contracting, the Clune, DPR, Fortis, Turner, all these multi billion dollar companies, to have them start to help basically take their MEP and build a consistent program throughout the industry. So now we have a general contractor based commissioning process and we have an owner side commissioning process. We have level 1 through 3 that meets up with level 4 and level 5. So my program integrates that process all the way through level 1 through level 5. Excuse me, level 0 through level 5. And the idea is for us to spread that wealth, to be able to train and better the industry as a whole. So I got goals.
Okay. All right. I see you there, Justin. I see you raising the bar. I get it.
Yep.
One last question. If you could change one standard practice in the BAS industry tomorrow, what would it be and why?
I would say standardize your wire coloring for their wire types. So I would say something like I grew up with orange being it was orange jacketed 22 to low cap MSTP com wire.
Hmm.
Well, if we're doing back net, is it going to be a three wire? Is it going to be a four? What's the I would say standardize your wire jacket coloring. This way, when you open up the cable trough above it, you know that, oh, okay, all these wires with the yellow, with the white with a yellow and red stripe are digital outputs. And with the black with the red yellow stripe is analog outputs. And the black wires are, digital inputs. And, just I would say if I could change a standard, it would be wire coloring for the entire industry so that there's no confusion. And when you're looking at a bundle because they didn't dress their cable trough properly, it's just an absolute rat's nest up there, you at least have a chance to know that you might get it right.
Yeah. Okay. I am picking up what you're putting down there. Makes perfect sense to me. So Justin, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule, because I know that you're in a hotel in DC right now, doing this. So you're on the East Coast time like me, because I live in Charleston, South Carolina. So,
Love that
um,
stat. I went to nuke school there.
yep. Oh yeah. No. So you were in Goose Creek,
Yep, Goose Creek.
South Carolina. Yep.
My
So,
uncle actually lives in Mount Pleasant. He
okay.
moved there. He moved there in 2006. I
Okay.
want to say they retired from upstate New York, or not upstate, but they retired from as teachers in New York in the early 2000s, and then they moved to this big, beautiful house in Mount Pleasant on the golf course, like on a hole. I think it's the sixth hole on the course down there.
Okay.
Yeah, just gorgeous.
All right. Well, awesome. Again, Justin, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come and talk to us on the podcast. So,
Hey,
again,
I
really thank
appreciate the invite. It was an absolute honor. It's great hearing from you guys. Again, I love hanging out. I love talking with you. Anytime we get together, it's usually a guest. So, thanks for keeping me in your mind for that. And
Yep.
again, anything you may need, reach out.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I probably want to bring you on back on somewhere for some kind of networking thing, like because you mentioned DDNS and stuff like that.
Thanks for joining us. It was great having you today.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all we have for this episode. Remember to stay curious and attack the problem. Until next time, I'm Charles.
And I'm Matthew.
And this has been It's a Controls Problem. Man, it's been a while since I've done a podcast. Holy shit.